Scores of Jacob Zuma supporters breathed a sigh of relief when the Constitutional Court agreed to hear his application for the revocation of its ruling. In its judgment this week, the Apex Court sentenced the former president to 15 months in jail, also ordering Zuma to hand himself over to the police within 5 days, and that lapses today. This for his defiance of the court's order to appear before the Zondo Commission. To find out what this means for the ruling party, we're now joined by Xolani Dube, political analyst at Zubera Institute for Research and Development, and Sanusha Naidu, a political analyst and senior research associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue. Thank you both very much for joining us. Now, of course, we see that this is happening. Very interesting for those of us who are interested in the politics of this country. But I just want to start with you, Sanusha, if you would agree with those who are saying that this was obvious on the part of the president. He's very good at trying to buy time.
Good morning, Maseko, Xolani, and the viewers. I think you're right. I think it was, let me put it into context from where how I interpreted the whole situation. On Tuesday, it was almost inevitable, the former president would have to present himself to a police station or under duress go to a police station and then, of course, serve this 15-month sentence. Come Thursday, we saw the whole situation being very unpredictable. There was talk that he would now try and look at the legal ramifications of this, what his legal options are. And then Friday afternoon, we saw the whole thing turn upside down. So I think at the end of the day, it really makes us wonder to what extent the president or the former president really wants his day in court, or is he really committed to the idea of serving this 15-month sentence? And we see in today's newspapers a number of different commentaries and analysis around the fact that Mr. Jacob Zuma has now thrown the entire legal system into a disarray, but also the political landscape. And I think to a large extent, this again tells us how unpredictable he is as a person, but also unpredictability that he creates in the way that the whole situation unfolded. Should we be surprised? I think, at the end of the day, some of us may have thought he would actually follow what the ruling of the Constitutional Court was. But again, at the same time, I think there were hints of this coming out with regard to how the Jacob Zuma Foundation statement, what was said there. Even reading the affidavit, parts of it, parts of it which is not legally defined for me, I think gives you a sense of the fact that Mr. Jacob Zuma just does not want to go anywhere slowly, and he's not going anywhere without a fight. And I think to the broader South African public, I know there were a lot of interesting debates yesterday and the day before about the address of the nation and so forth, and the way the language was portrayed. But I think to the broader South African public, I would assume, and I'm not making any presumptions, that we are just tired. I think people are just tired. They just want to see this move forward. We want to see this whole process move forward. We are sitting in a pandemic. The numbers are just unprecedented in terms of the new of infections in the last 24 hours. The number of deaths are just unprecedented. Where do we go from here?
Xolani, hearing from what Sanusha is saying in terms of, for instance, he is putting the country into political and constitutional disarray, the fact that there are people who are saying that, and of course, Sanusha saying that as South Africans, we are tired of dealing with the former president. Would you agree with that? And would you agree that this also goes back to the president saying that the Constitutional Court made this judgment from an anger position?
Look, I think what we have to do here, let's remove the person Jacob Zuma from the whole thing, and let's look on the realities that are unfolding in our country, with or without Jacob Zuma. I think what is being exposed since, let me say, 2005, during that Heifer Commission, where there was Moshe Meg Maharaj maneuvering their way through the legal system of our country. Remember that commission, and look where we now post Bulwane and Nazareth. I think all this shows how fragile and how weak our judiciary, how can it easily be manipulated for political expediency. And so I think that this whole thing that you see today or in the politics of South Africa, it shows that law and politics, to a certain extent, they are intertwined, and we cannot simply overlook that sometimes the ruling class or those who are dominating our country through power, political power, economic power, and so forth, they can use judiciary for their leverage, and they can use it as a shamble to whip those whom they think that they are not towing the line. Because one would simply ask himself, look, this person has been the president of this country for more than for 2 terms. And today, this is the same person who is challenging all the institutions that once he led. And moreover, these are the institutions that he was an architect. If you remember that Jacob Zuma was involved in each and every negotiation in our country. And so I think what we see here is the political elite fighting amongst themselves for their own interest. And so I don't foresee that the ordinary people of South Africa really can go and take side and claim that this one is correct and this one is not correct, because the fight of the elite is not the fight that aims to empower and develop and protect the vulnerable and the gullible of this country.
Let me just stay with that, Xolani. You're saying that there are people who are using, for instance, the judiciary to fight political battles. We've heard before that the former president himself, for instance, did the same in some of the political battles he had during the time he was serving as president. So who within this party that we already know is very divided would you say is using the judiciary to fight political battles against the former president?
Look, remember that we have the issue of Marikana. No one was arrested. We were having the issue, we had the issue of life as it demanded. No one was arrested. There is the issue of Koloben. People are dying left and right. The issue of Tatan and the others. No one is being arrested. What you have to understand that the political elite will always protect each other, because there are people who are saying, look, at Marikana, it was during the Jacob Zuma time. And the Jacob Zuma protected everyone. And also we have issue of the armed steel, and we were saying that they are the bullfrogs of that armed steel who are not behind bars. And so that's why I'm saying our judiciary is always misused by the South African political elite. Possible Zuma now is saying, look, guys, I've been protecting you while I was still at the helm of this country. And so what are you trying to do now? And so that's why I'm saying, if we're going to look at the case of Jacob Zuma through the prism of our own factional eye, we will be having a serious problem. Because the fact of the matter here is that the South African political elite, they are protecting each other at a particular time. They want to betray each other as well. And so the reason that for us to go, I don't find us a serious reason to go out and defend this one and try not to defend the other one. We as South African citizens, what we need to do is to say, look, let's have a parallel conversation here to try to review really these laws that the political elite agreed upon in Codesa, to check if these laws are there to serve all of us or are there to serve the interests of the political elite.
Sanusha, I'm going to come to you, Sanusha. After listening to what Xolani is saying, you would, for instance, probably remember the judgment of the Constitutional Court from Tuesday saying he's been playing victim, saying that the judiciary is always doing something against him for the past 20 years. What Xolani is saying is also going back to that sort of, even that 21-page letter that he addressed to the Deputy Chief Justice, to the Chief Justice rather, saying that, there are political battles, that those in the judiciary are forgetting their constitutional obligation and using the court to basically attack him. Would you say that's where Xolani is going?
Yeah, I think Xolani is raising a very important point in terms of when do you manipulate and compromise the institutions of the state and the democracy? I think, in the context of the letter that Mr. Zuma wrote to the Chief Justice, in all of the reaction to the judiciary and what you see also in the context of the affidavit, I think there's a sense that, I've played my role here, so I should not necessarily be put against the ropes in terms of what's happening. These are circumstances beyond my control. I'm the victim. I'm the one that's being politically targeted and so forth. I think what happens in a situation like this is that you appeal to people's sense of empathy and sympathy, and you appeal to the idea that, I'm the victim and basically I've done all of this for you and you now want to basically incarcerate me. I think the challenge we have in South Africa, and not just in South Africa, the world over, when it comes to political elites, is how they manipulate the situation. And I think for me, that is a greater issue in terms of where you take people along, not on the basis of you genuinely believe in what you are saying, but on the basis that you're manipulating the situation because you realize that the situation has to be manipulated for your own ends. And those that are part of that whole process then start to come in and say, how do I negotiate this with you? How do I make sure? How do I appeal? That's the one area. The other area is that, there's also the personality politics, the personality of the situation, and the person who actually sits at the top says, or sits in these political elite streams who argue that I am a political elite, so how dare you come after me? And I think that in itself has no place right now in the world, because we are seeing the whole system of democracy being challenged in particular ways along these lines. The age of impunity that some people are talking about globally, that we have entered in terms of this international system, where is the accountability? And I think that's what I want to see is, in spite of the fact that these political elites are getting away with what they are getting away with, they can't keep getting away with it all the time. And I think this is where the rubber hits the road in many ways, because at the end of the day, the accountability, the fact that you can act with impunity means that you don't care about ordinary people. And very often it is on the shoulders of ordinary people that you get where you get to. And I think the time has come for us to now take on this challenge and say that we're not going to keep accepting the fact that you can act in the way that you do and disregard institutions that you claim are legitimate, that you claim that you fought for, but you just don't want to respect them.
Xolani, hearing what Sanusha has said, what is your response, especially looking at the fact that the former president was given time to respond in this application, but he didn't? So he could have had a fair trial, if you want to put it that way, or a fair hearing, rather, because there was no trial. But he didn't.
Look, that's the problem, when we try to individualize this discourse and this problem that we are facing as a country, because, there are also problems that we are incubating as we speak, that will head in the near future, And so the issue of Cyril Ramaphosa, the issue of all those people who are exposed in Zondo Commission to a certain extent not to have been honest to us South Africans, And so when we deal with the issues of what you call it, law and justice and politics, let us not single one person. Let's deal with the total unfairness and the total manipulation of our justice system by the South African elites, not by Jacob Zuma. Let's put personality aside here. Let's look at how the political elite, especially the ANC, protects each other when it comes to the issues of law and justice, and how they can simply send one of their own when they feel that this person can be a sacrificial lamb for the good of the rest. And so that's why I'm saying, if we're going to concentrate on Zuma, I can assure you, in 10 or 5 years coming, we'll be dealing with Cyril Ramaphosa. This is the time for those who are in.
And I know there's a delay with Xolani, and I'm sure he'll be able to hear me interjecting. I have to come in and say that it has to be about the former president at the moment, because that's who the whole case was about. And I want to move from the court now to politics in the ANC, specifically with the role that he still plays in politics, seeing the support that he's getting, for instance, with the PEC. We know that KZN has been quite an unstable province in terms of ANC politics. Back in the days of the IFP versus the ANC, and even the ANC against itself. We've had the Farlam Commission of Inquiry, for instance, with political killings in that province, with the ANC members going against each other. Will this, with the president having all the support and all these the politics within the ANC insisting that they need to go there to negotiate with the former president, is that not going to cause political instability in our country and possibly more violence now from this party?
Look, I don't think so. You know, people, they've went through the most horrible past, especially in KZN. I don't think that we can simply say use violence as kind of thing that we can simply throw here and now and again, you know, when it comes to KZN. People in KZN, they understand what is at stake. They have their own personal issues. The people that you see there in Kandla, it will be quite incorrect to do what you call it tribal profiling. You know, ANC has nothing to do with the people of KwaZulu-Natal. ANC is a political organization. And so let's say within the ANC, throughout the whole country, we've seen killings. Within the ANC throughout the whole country, we've seen turmoil. Why? Because the ANC is an organization that is no longer respecting its conceptual doctrines, of which is to fight for the historically dispossessed and the oppressed. And so they are fighting for their own interest. What you see, what we call it Amabuto and so forth, because I know that's where we are going, to say possible is invoking what you call it Zulu nationalism. Look, to a certain extent, that might be true, but we need to be historical as well as sociological to say why the Zulu people always rise when they see that one of theirs is being under siege. Here is not. They might be using Zuma as a symbolism where the tradition confront what we call it the modernity. These are the people who are the outcasts of the Western system. And so they will use any opportunity to confront the Western system. If we have heard their songs, it's about colonialism, it's about the white people, it's not about the black people, it's not about politics. And so one can say, possible here, we see modernity and traditionally being at each other's at each other's throats, but not literal again. And so I think they're invoking our historical hostility towards modernity. And so really, people might use any opportunity to vent out their hostility or their disgruntlement about the issues of modernity.
I think, Xolani, it's more than Amabuto. It's also about the MKMVA also being out there. But I just want to go back to Sanusha because I'm running out of time. This still shows the power that the former president still has within the provinces of KZN and Mpumalanga. We saw people arriving from that province outside his Nkandla home. It still shows that support. He has the PEC, for instance, and the chairperson of KZN also sort of pledging his support. And they keep saying there's political negotiations. Every time they come out of a meeting with the president, the former president, they keep saying there's political negotiations. So would you agree with Xolani, or possibly say that this is negotiations that would possibly lead the current president to, try and make a plan to make sure that there's peace and stability in these provinces and nobody fights, for instance, with police or each other to protect the former president, as they've been saying? Because they've been saying they'll protect him with everything they've got. They say they die. They actually say those words, I will die, before the police are able to arrest the former president.
Yeah, I think to a large extent what Xolani is saying is important, because I think he's raising a fundamental question about, the modernity, the challenges, the internal dynamics of the party as it modernizes, but in what context is it modernizing? And then there's a reaction to that. I do, however, digress a little bit in terms of when it suits you to modernize and when it suits you not to modernize, and then you use the specter of saying, well, we're challenging this Western system or we're challenging this colonial system. That internal dynamics of the party is also about the fact that, it's about vested political interests, and it's when do you use those dynamics of bringing out that emotion and that emotiveness to come out and say, support me, and people go out and support you, but they support you in a manner that is not necessarily violent-free at times. I think the violence is an undercurrent to what may potentially happen or what may potentially not happen. And I think that becomes the area in which people get nervous, people get very concerned. There's levels of instability. And I think the political negotiations, the constant need to negotiate and to try and enable the individual or individuals or a set of individuals to come to some kind of realization and some kind of agreement around why it is important to not let the issue become so out of control or manifest itself in such a way that it raises these potential issues and security risks that you are raising, Masego. I think comes back to the point is how much more can you negotiate? It's if everybody believes that this organization, this political party that is the ruling party that represents a particular historical legacy that is basically about the values, about the role of the dispossessed and the marginalized and the vulnerable and so forth, then you should actually do this for the greater good of the party. But unfortunately, what we are seeing is what Xolani has rightly pointed out is the selfish interests and how those issues have overtaken. And when do you use that for your selfishness? And I think that for me is not just about the ANC as well. It's about how political parties evolve and what happens in that modernization. And to a large extent, that modernization, maybe, you all agree we are modernizing, but then when you need to raise a kind of specter against it, and then you use different angles to do that, whether it's Westernism or colonialism or whatever, then at the end of the day, you've got to go internally and ask yourself, what are our values? What is it that we want to modernize around that represents a cohesive identity of the party?